So, you got a preview of the new office at the opening there. This is the first of what is sure to be many new videos in this facility. So got the keys, and yesterday started doing a little work in here to patch some nail holes and things, get ready for paint. Got to put a coat of paint on the offices, and then as you saw, the warehouse has a lot of lovely bright lime green and black stripes and things. This place before this was a CrossFit and Krav Maga martial arts training facility, so they had it painted back there to their theme colors, I guess. And so we'll be getting rid of that and going with the old battleship gray on the walls for the warehouse, and just get a coat of white paint on the office up here. The office is the priority right now, and so we can get moved in here and get set up, but we can't do that yet until inspections and everything's done. Landlord was in yesterday, had someone come in and check out the HVAC systems. Got a couple little problems that waiting on answers on to take care of. We've got a couple emergency exit lights that aren't working when the power goes off, and they look like they're just old and probably need replaced. And one of the thermostats for the air conditioning units is blank this morning. It was working yesterday, but we'll get all that worked out. Minor things that pretty really minor compared to everything we've been faced with the past 4 months. And so we're getting started. We are I was pleasantly surprised and pleasantly shocked with the permit process with Lee County. I sent in the paperwork night before last by email with my floor plan and site plan, and I was, really hoping that nothing had changed, because the guy was in here for 10 years, and sometimes people do things without permits, like put up a wall or something. Well, then that, makes things really weird. But when they go to change the occupant, but everything was fine, I guess, and they signed off on it. And the building inspector, I guess, is coming today just to look at it and sign off on it, hopefully. And I have Comcast coming today to put in the internet. And then I bought a paint sprayer last night so I can get the coat of paint on the office here and get this knocked out before we moved in. And so here, let me give you a quick tour of the new office. Coming in the front door, we have two suites. It's a two spaces that have a door that joins between two. So we'll walk down the one side first, and I'll show you around here. All right, so here's the front area. When you come in the front door, we don't need or have a lot of office space, but we have some. And so most likely Tammy will be out here, and depending on what else we do, probably going to end up with a CSR or two before long, and they'll probably be out here as well. And then as I walk through, we've got, let me back up and give you a view here. We got a half round window there that goes into an office, and double French doors here. And this will likely be my office, and nice big office, plenty of room for me to set up all my tables and desks and cameras and do everything I need to do. So I was originally going to do it out here and put Tammy in here, but then after they were moved out and I saw how this was a little bit bigger space and it'll work out well for me, and I can close the doors and do my videos and not have any outside noises or me be disturbing Tammy while she's on phone calls or whatever. And we've got a restroom here, and that's the door to the other side. We'll go over there in a few minutes. And that's another door to the same restroom. We have a little kitchenette area. Then we'll put a fridge down there. And there's a door here that takes us back into the first warehouse space. This is the first space that we'll be using for probably for a few months. This space, the whole one side of this office is about 2,500 square feet. So I think this space back here is about 1,500 probably, and this will be plenty space for us to get started. It's a nice big rectangular room that allows me to set it up the way I need instead of having to work around different things like I've had to do in the past sometimes. So this is looking good, and pretty happy with what's going on here. And we walk back out here. We'll walk over to the other side, and we have an identical front door and window situation, just no offices here. And so we have one big warehouse over here. This side's 2,500 square feet. So the whole place, the two suites together, is 5,000 square feet. And another restroom here. We have a roll-up door and a man door on the back of the building on the east side. And currently this side is not air conditioned, but it will be by the time we use it for storing any kind of product, because it will have to be, especially down here in South Florida. So just they're prepping the walls and getting them ready to paint and everything. Not a whole lot we can do other than that until they get that done. So there is the quick tour of the new office and warehouse. So hope you enjoyed that, and sit down here for a minute and talk about what's going on. So I was thinking about something the other day. I was editing the video from my trip out to San Francisco and Mountain View, and was the shots when I was walking around the Google campus after my meetings, and I was kind of thinking back to something that is like a sign. I guess I felt like I was on a good path or on the right path. And it happened about 12 years ago, and maybe 11, 12 years ago. And I had an idea for a social network, and I actually filed a provisional patent on it. It was a process. You can file a patent on a process. You can't patent an idea, but you can patent a process. And so I had actually filed a provisional patent on it, which means you have the patent, you have up to a year to actually register it and do everything, and it's still protected. So I ended up not doing it, of course, and would have been probably retired by now, because a few years later Facebook actually came out with the feature that I had patented, or was going to patent. And it had to do with a kind of a parent-child relationship in social media, where there's a thing called COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, where this is the reason anything you sign up for asks if you're over 13 or not. So children under 13, in order for anyone to collect profile data on them, has to have the approval of their parent or guardian, or they have to be emancipated, or whatever. And I had come up with a methodology on how social networks could bring younger children than 13 into their fold and be COPPA compliant, yet still give the parents or guardians control of the accounts. And was quite elaborate, actually. I had typed up quite the process on how this worked. And of course, didn't get any bites from Facebook to discuss it. And it was around the time when Google came out with Google Plus, if you remember that. So Google had their own little social network for a while that didn't really take off. And so I looked up and started researching Google Plus when it came out. And the person at the time that was in charge of all of Google's social networking was a gentleman named Vic Gundotra. And Vic was very well known in Silicon Valley, of course. And he, I understand his history was that he was the first engineer that developed the .NET code for Microsoft. And then he left Microsoft eventually. I guess he waited out his non-compete for a year or whatever, and then he went to work for Google. So he was kind of like number 3 or 4 man at Google for a while. And but he was in charge of all social networking for Google. And I thought, boy, if I could get a conversation with someone like that, maybe I could get some traction. And I actually located his email address, and I sent him an email, and I didn't get a response. And about a week later, I sent him another email, didn't get a response. And about a week later, I sent him another email, and I said, I'd really like to, share my idea with you rather than Facebook, and would like an opportunity to speak to you about it. And late that Friday night, I received a reply where I was copied on an email where he sent an email to his assistant and asked them to set up a call with me. And I was blown away. That was just amazing. And so we set up the call, and it was a few days later, and Vic called me, or I called. I called him. Yeah, I remember calling him because it was a Google Voice number because it screened my call, And he answered, and we talked for about 30 minutes or so. Super nice guy, and obviously a very important person who gave me 30 minutes of his time based on an email. And it turned out they weren't interested in anything that had to do with anybody under 13, because he said the laws were too vague and the penalties were too high. And the FTC, actually, going back before I had this call, I actually even had 2 calls with the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, about the process and everything. So I was pretty deep into that now that I look back on it. But I had that call with Vic, and he let me know that they just weren't interested, and had a nice, pleasant conversation with him. I was very appreciative of the time that he gave me, of course. And when I look back on it, I'm even more appreciative now of that conversation. But it told me that the fact that I could reach out and get a hold of someone and have a conversation with someone that far up in Google, who at the time, I think Google was $30 or $40 billion company at the time. I can't remember, but big, not as big as they are now, but huge, of course. I was just kind of flabbergasted. One of the things, to tell you how far up he was, when Steve Jobs passed away, he had typed up a story and posted it about an interaction he had with Steve Jobs when Steve Jobs called him when Google, I guess the iPhone was coming out, or maybe a new model or something, and Steve Jobs had called him and let him know that the gradient on the yellow that was in the Google logo, there was something wrong with it and it wasn't rendering properly on the display. It just looked weird. And Vic was talking about how meticulous Steve Jobs was. And that he said he was, I think he was in church services as the story went, and his phone rang and he had to ignore the call, of course. But if Steve Jobs was calling you on your cell phone, you're pretty high up in Silicon Valley, I think. And the fact that I got to have that conversation was incredible. That was the time when I felt like I was on a good path, or on maybe the right path, or whatever, to be able to have that kind of conversation. And I was, prior to me having the call was scheduled, and I had a trip that I took with some investors where I was doing a due diligence project for a medical acquisition for some investors. And one of the gentlemen I was working on it with, the company was owned by, it's called Alvarez and Marsal, and Marsal was, in that partner name was Brian Marsal. He was the guy that was brought into Lehman Brothers when it crashed, like back in 2008 or whatever. He was brought in as the interim CEO to clean it up. So pretty high people in Wall Street, and I did work for them, so I was like 1 degree away from this guy. And I was like, wow, this is just kind of surreal to be this close to these kind of people. And when I was on that trip, and I asked some advice from the guy I was doing the work with, Jeffrey, and he told me, he said, this guy, he said, you're going to have a very short period of time to tell this guy what you're wanting and giving your pitch. And it was really, really good advice because I planned out my conversation very well, and got right to the point, had a good conversation with Vic. And, I carry that, it's a memory that I carry with me today from 11 or 12 years ago where, like I said, I got to have a call with someone extremely high up in Silicon Valley, and so I just kind of stayed on that path, tried to stay on that path, and try to keep the business side of things going well. And it worked out well for me, obviously, and I hope it continues to work out well. But when I was up there at Google the other day, sitting in that little park, looking back at the campus after I had left the campus, and was just thinking about that moment, and then here I am 11 or 12 years later sitting here looking at the building where he was probably at when I talked to him. So anyway, give you more updates as they come, and hopefully we'll be able to get this thing wrapped up with inspections soon and be able to get our office set up so that with the real work can begin. I said that the other day, and someone said, real work? What have you been doing till now? I said, well, the real work is anything that makes me sweat, because I do not like manual labor. And so there's going to be plenty of that, and we'll get this thing off the ground much sooner. The one thing is for certain, it's not going to be as long as it has been.